The story begins in the heart of Berlin. In the dark years of World War II, Bruno, an 8-year-old German boy, lives happily with his family. He loves running through the streets with his friends and imagining adventures, as he has always wanted to be an explorer. His father, whose name is Ralph, is a high-ranking Nazi official. Bruno doesn't exactly understand what that means, but he admires him for his bearing and uniform. One day he comes home and finds his mother, Elsa, and Gretel, his older sister, in the middle of preparations. His father has been promoted, and the whole family must move to a house in the countryside. Bruno is confused. He doesn't understand why they have to leave Berlin, leave their friends, their school, and their favorite garden. His mother tries to comfort him, telling him it will be a great adventure, and that he will meet new friends. But Bruno isn't convinced. Upon arriving at the new house, they notice it's enormous, surrounded by gigantic trees, a large security fence, and heavily guarded by soldiers. From his window, Bruno sees something strange. What he thinks is a farm. He sees lots of people there, all dressed the same in striped pajamas and hats. Bruno starts helping his mother put the dishes away, where he tells her that he wants to play with the farm children. His mother, unaware of this, asks him how he knows this, and Bruno replies that he's seen them since his room. At that moment, a supposed farmer named Pavel enters, bringing vegetables, to which Bruno tells his mother that those who live on the farm are strange, because they dress in pajamas like the farmer who came in. At that moment, Elsa goes to Bruno's room to see the farm. Upon discovering the true purpose of the place they've been sent to, she's devastated. She thought they were there only for their job, husband, but she soon realizes that they're living next to an extermination camp, so she confronts, but he immediately leaves. One morning while having breakfast as a family, Bruno mentions that he misses school. Their father tells them he's hired a tutor, so it won't be necessary for them to go to school anymore, but the school is coming to them. Bruno is confused because he missed his friends too. Gretel is also confused at first, but this will soon change because she will be influenced by the ideology of the Nazi regime. Bruno notices that strange people are working in the house. One of them is Pavel, an older man with a tired face and dull eyes, who cuts vegetables and serves the food. One day, while playing alone on a swing he made himself, Bruno falls and hurts his leg. Pavel observes the incident and goes to help him, takes him to the kitchen, carries him, and bandages his wound. During that conversation, Bruno discovers that Pavel wasn't always a servant, used to be a doctor. And that revelation, it perplexes. How can someone who was a doctor now be cleaning in his kitchen? When his mother arrives and sees Bruno with his bandaged foot, she asks him what happened, to which he replies that he fell off the swing, and Pavel was the one who helped him. Elsa, surprised, all she can manage is to thank Pavel. Shortly after, a private tutor arrives at the house. Herles, a rigid, serious man of ideas, extremists. He doesn't teach literature, much less the arts, only history, German and Nazi doctrine. Gretel is very interested in classes, while Bruno feels bored and seems very confused, is more interested in reading adventures, exploring and imagining many worlds. Herles notices this and constantly corrects him. Bruno, she begins to notice that there's something dark in everything that man is teaching them. Life at home is monotonous for Bruno. Without friends, without school, without the freedom to explore, he spends his days staring out the window and wandering around the garden. One day, ignoring the warnings, he decides to walk down a path in the woods. He walks until he reaches the farm wire fence and sees a child sitting on the ground with his head shaved and wearing pajamas. Rayada, her name is Shmuel, and she's the same age as him. Their first encounter is silent at first. Bruno asks what he's doing, and replies that he has a new house. He also asks if there are many children on the side where he is, to which Shmuel he answers yes. Bruno is happy, thinking that maybe they can play, but he sees Shmuel as someone skinny, sad, with a dirty face. They still start talking. Our protagonist introduces himself as Bruno, and the child who is locked up as Shmuel. Both are surprised by his name, since it was the first time they were listening to him. However, Shmuel is very hungry and asks for food, but Bruno hadn't brought anything. Bruno feels envious of Shmuel because he thinks they're playing around because of his dress size, but Shmuel tells him that everyone has a different size. At that moment, he begins to retreat because the soldiers appear. However, Bruno felt happy for a moment because he was able to meet another child his own age. The next day, Bruno wants to play with his ball but can't find it. He consults his mother, who asks him to look in the basement. Bruno goes looking for it and manages to find it. However, he also discovers that all of her sister's dolls, Gretel, is lying around out of fear. She runs to tell her sister. However, her sister confesses that she was the one who threw away all her dolls, and now she's only interested in politics. So she decided to throw away all of them, her dolls, and replace them with maps. Nazi flags and propaganda posters, Nazis. When Gretel decides to get rid of her dolls, she's leaving her childhood behind. Dolls symbolize childhood and innocence, play and purity. By throwing them away, Elsa is consciously adopting the Nazi thought instilled in him by his tutor and those around him, leaving aside his childhood in order to fit into society. The next day, Bruno visits Shmuel and asks him why they always wear pajamas. He replies that they took all his clothes and gave him the suits they're wearing. At that moment, a very strong smell wafts up, and Bruno asks Esh what they're burning in the fireplaces, but Esh doesn't know what's happening, and he only says they're burning used clothes. At this, Bruno invites Esh so they can have dinner together at his house, but he confesses that he can't go out because he's Jewish. Bruno is surprised and only proceeds to leave but says goodbye to Esh. Meanwhile, at home, Elsa heads to her daughter Gretel's room to give her a gift and is surprised that her beloved daughter is adopting the Nazi thought, which leads her to argue with her husband. Ralph distrusts his tutor's teachings because his daughter has changed in her attitude, but he doesn't take it seriously. On another day, Bruno saves a lot of food and takes it to his friend Esh, who starts eating like there's no tomorrow. Bruno throws his ball to play with, but his friend gets scared because they can't play. At that moment, the guards appear and Esh leaves. Bruno returns to the house, meets his mother, who sees smoke from the garden constantly coming out of a large chimney. The unpleasant smell is very strong. He asks a soldier what the smoke is, who answers, "They stink worse when they burn." Horrified, Elsa confronts her husband Ralph in an intense argument, yelling at him, but she didn't know that was what she was really doing. Their debts, she thought it was just a stall administrative. He tries to justify his actions with words like country and duty, but Elsa doesn't want to hear anymore, tells him he's a monster, that this isn't the life she wants for her children. The discussion ends, it becomes increasingly personal, and Elsa, emotionally devastated, begins to cry. At another formal dinner, where Lieutenant Kotler is also present, and Bruno's grandfather, he begins to talk about German history. Lieutenant Kotler tells Bruno that when he was his age, history was his favorite subject, and that it bothered his father because he was a literature professor at the university. However, Ralph is surprised to hear about Kotler's father, and asks him about his current location. He excuses himself by telling them, but under pressure from Ralph, he tells him to be in Switzerland. Ralph sees it as an act of treason, mentioning that he left just when his country needed him the most, unless he left. Why he was at odds with the government? At that time, Pavel approaches to pour the wine and accidentally spills it. On Kotler, the tension is cut. Kotler gets up and drags Pavel out of the dining room to hit him, who screams in pain from the kitchen. In their rooms, the siblings talk about what happened. Bruno is sad for Pavel, since Pavel was very kind to him, while Gretel is increasingly influenced by ideology. Nazi says he deserved it for being Jewish. At that point, Bruno asks his sister about the farm, but she confesses that the farm is actually a labor camp for Jews, and that they're there because they're the enemy. One day, Bruno walks into the kitchen and is surprised to see sitting at the table has been taken into the house to clean the glasses because his hands are too small. Bruno, excited to see him, offers him some food, but just then, Kotler comes in. Kotler sees him eating and gets angry. He accuses Shmuel of stealing. Shmuel is trembling. He says Bruno gave it to him. Kotler interrogates him. However, Bruno, very frightened, denies knowing him. Shmuel is punished, and Bruno begins to cry alone. One day, a group of high-ranking officials arrive at the house. They are greeted enthusiastically by Ralph. It's an inspection visit, but also a propaganda visit. Everyone gathers in a small living room in the house to watch a documentary about the labor camp, which is beyond the fence. Curious Bruno watches through a window. The documentary where they show Jewish prisoners who supposedly live in good conditions, smile, work in a bakery, eat, and even play. The officers look on approvingly. One even comments that the organization is impressive, and the humanity with which the prisoners are treated. Ralph nods with a smile. Elsa is also present, her face still, but her eyes reveal disbelief. Ralph knows perfectly well it's a show, a smokescreen to deceive his superiors, and even himself. However, Bruno thinks his father is helping others, so he hugs him tightly. The next day, Bruno runs to the fence to see Shmuel, but he can't find him. The same thing happens in the following days, until one day he finds his face, beaten up with bruises and a very sad look. He doesn't understand the situation since he had seen a movie about the farm, which was a good place, and so he asks for forgiveness for having betrayed him and that he feels very ashamed, despite everything. Shmuel forgives him, and at that moment they seal their friendship once and for all with a handshake. While having breakfast, Ralph receives the sad news that his mother had been killed by a bombing raid. The family had to return to Berlin for the funeral. Ralph's mother, the grandmother who loved plays, the woman who disapproved of her son's uniform and who openly opposed Nazism, and who distanced herself from them because his convictions, has passed away. Back at night, Elsa can't stand the situation anymore. She tells her husband she's leaving with the children. For Berlin, she doesn't want to see anything else. Smoke, no screaming soldiers, no children working. Demands that they leave. Ralph refuses, claiming it's his duty to stay. Firmly replies, "If you don't leave, I'll leave, and I'll take the kids." Ralph agrees, and a departure date is set. Bruno finds out and runs but to tell Shmuel, telling him that he'll be leaving soon and that they won't be able to see each other anymore. Is devastated, telling him that his father has disappeared. In the camp, Bruno promises to help his friend find his father. He thinks it's a good opportunity to make up for betraying him. Lieutenant Cott has an idea. He'll dig a hole under the fence. He'll cross it, and together they'll look for Shmuel's father. The next day, Bruno carries a small shovel. He digs a hole and puts a pajamas, but Striped that Shmuel gets him leaves his folded clothes next to the fence and crawls under it. At that moment, his mother sees that Bruno is not there, playing. So, he goes out to look for him for the first time. Bruno is inside the farm, and what he sees makes him silent. Skeletal men, sad faces, mud, stench. He walks alongside Shmuel looking for his father. Meanwhile, Elsa, faced with Bruno's absence, calls him everywhere. The house looks for him in his room, in the garden. She runs through the house in anguish and even interrupts a meeting Ralph is having to tell him Bruno isn't there. He also starts looking for him. He finds his son's clothes by the fence. He immediately understands, so he runs toward the field yelling Bruno, but no one answers. At that moment, he begins it starting to rain, and inside the camp, the children are dragged away by a group of soldiers. Bruno and Shmuel are pushed into a dark chamber. Along with other prisoners, they are asked to undress, claiming that it will be a shower. Some cry. Others, they pray. Others just wait. Bruno and they don't understand what's happening and hold hands. The door closes, followed by a terrifying silence, followed by a click. The soldiers have activated the gas chamber mechanism and darkness envelops them. Bruno, dead among the prisoners, a victim of the same system that his father served. Outside, the father arrives too late. The tragedy has already occurred, and when he sees what has happened, all he can do is shout his son's name. Bruno, the mother, upon hearing her son's name, understands what has happened, falls to the ground and starts screaming in pain, while Gretel just cries silently. Bruno and Shmuel are two innocent children, victims of a system that they never understood, a true friendship that blossomed in the worst of places, and Elsa, a mother who she lost everything for staying too long in a place that from the beginning she felt was wrong. While Bruno maintains an innocent and human gaze toward his Jewish friend Shmuel, Gretel, her sister, leaves, aligning herself with the cruelty and contempt promoted by the Nazi regime, which shows how two children exposed to the same environment can follow very different paths, depending on either the environment or the influences they receive. Gretel, it doesn't change because of real maturity, but because of social pressure. It's not a healthy evolution, but rather an imposed deformation that makes us think about how many children and young people of that time were victims of that manipulation. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like this type of content, subscribe and support us with a like that will help me a lot. It will be with me until the next video. Bye-bye.